Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, aka your friendly neighborhood spoiler man, and this video we're breaking down the movie that started it all. That is 2008's Iron Man. Iron Man kickstarted the MCU, and had it not been for the film's success, it's unlikely that the Marvel Universe would be the way that it is today. Revisiting the movie after binge-watching the Infinity Saga makes it so much better, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down some of the aspects that only really pay off once you've taken a trip through all 23 films. There's some amazing shots that poetically pay things off down the line, items and elements that reoccur throughout, and overall the film is a shining example of why this series is such an incredible piece of film. We will be going into heavy spoiler territory for all 23 films, so if you haven't had a chance to watch them, then I highly recommend that you turn off now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day, and please drop a thumbs up if you enjoy it. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into our breakdown of Iron Man. Okay, so the movie opens by thumping Back in Black by AC/DC. This very much becomes a theme of Stark throughout the film, and it's later used by Happy in Far From Home as Peter Parker creates his new suit. This makes the passing of the torch feel full circle, and we are almost immediately hit with a shot of Tony Stark's hand holding a glass of single malt scotch on the rocks. This is the same beverage that he pours himself in Avengers when confronting Loki, and it shows that the character does have a preferred drink. However, the fact we open on Stark with his hand holding a glass of alcohol also symbolises his journey through the MCU. Stark was an alcoholic, and this is very much hammered home here. His hand is the main focus of the shot, and this point would be brought full circle by his final act in Endgame. The first time we see Stark, it's his hand doing something self-destructive to himself that shows his self-centered attitude. One of the last times that we see him is through his hand doing something self-destructive for the good of others, which shows how far the character has come. It's the perfect way to both introduce the character and say goodbye to him, hammering home just how much of a journey he's gone on. In the Humvee, he takes a selfie with a soldier who he makes fun of for holding up a peace sign. Stark says he'd be out of the job with peace, but we see how far he's come upon exiting the cave as he holds up a peace sign to an aircraft overhead. In Age of Ultron he says peace in our time, and in Endgame when repairing his relationship with Cap he says he just wants peace. After the group are ambushed, we see a Stark rocket land beside him before it explodes. This is similar to the Stark rocket that we hear haunted Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver when they were children in Age of Ultron. We cut to 36 hours earlier and an award show that's being held in Las Vegas. Here we learn of Tony's past as well as Howard Stark's. In an article, Tony is seen building his robot arm Dumb-E, and we see mention of Stark building 2 prototype AIs. This could be a nod to Ultron and Jarvis, the both of whom Stark ends up creating, but it could also be a reference to Friday, who ends up replacing Jarvis after he becomes the Vision. Dumb-E of course becomes a nice bit of set dressing throughout the Iron Man trilogy, and it's nice that Stark still keeps around his first invention. He of course does this with all his suits too, until he destroys them at the end of the third movie. I just hope Dumb-E didn't go the same way. RIP. Howard's death is discussed in the video, and we can see that this was reported on a newspaper dated the 17th of December 1991. In Captain America Civil War we see from CCTV footage that the Winter Soldier killed the Starks on the 16th of December 1991, so it's nice that this continuity detail has held up across all the films in between. Tony taking the reins of the company in the wake of his father's death is referred to as the prodigal son returning. In Iron Man 3, Tony refers to the Mark 42 as the prodigal son, and this is a nice echoing of the famous saying. Cut to Tony in a casino, and we can actually hear the Iron Man theme from the 60s playing in the background. We meet Christine Everhart, who does a lovely spread on Tony, and she of course appears in Iron Man 2 as someone that's doing a lovely spread on Justin Hammer. At the end of the movie, Tony announces that he's Iron Man, and the entire audience stand up except for Christine, who remains seated. This is because she had already figured out that Tony was Iron Man and therefore wasn't that surprised. After they spend the night together, we're introduced to Jarvis, who we learn in Endgame is named after the Stark's butler. In the basement, Tony works away on the hot rod, and we can hear the song institutionalized by suicidal tendencies. This could be a nod to Tony Stark's willingness to sacrifice his own life at several points throughout the MCU. This happens at the end of this movie, the Avengers, and of course Endgame, which saw the final appearance of the character. Pepper asks if Tony will finally speak at MIT, and he sort of brushes her off and refuses to sign an agreement. Stark would eventually speak there in Civil War, which would lead to his bath demonstration, and then eventually make Mysterio hate his guts. So if he'd agreed to the appearance, then perhaps he could have avoided causing trouble for Peter. Iron Man is often cited as creating his own worst enemies, and this is an almost butterfly effect occurrence that caused so many problems down the line. On the plane, Tony and Rhodey listen to Ghostface Killer, who often refers to himself as Iron Man. He was also supposed to have a cameo in the film, but this was later removed. Also, can we acknowledge how badly Terrence Howard messed up by quitting after this film? Damn. Also, shout out Iron Man 2 for maybe the best recast scene of all time.
Look, it's me. I'm here. Deal with it. Let's move on.
After demonstrating the Jericho, Tony gets his drink, which we would then see at the start of the movie, and he gets into the Fun V, leading to the events that kickstarted the movie. He wakes up after being saved by Dr. Yinsen, who remarks that they met before at a technical conference in Bern. Stark says he doesn't remember, and Yinsen says that he's not surprised, as if he'd been that drunk, he wouldn't remember either. We actually see this meeting play out in Iron Man 3, and yeah, to be fair, Tony, he was pretty drunk. Tony is kidnapped by the Ten Rings, who are led by the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, though this could be getting retconned for Shang-Chi, which is set to reveal the actual Ten Rings and the real Mandarin. Tony is told to build a Jericho missile, but he instead builds the Mark 1 and a new reactor. We learn that palladium is used to power the arc reactor, and this element is actually laced throughout the film. In the movie, we can see that the giant arc reactor is filled with palladium gas, and tanks containing it are placed behind Tony when he talks to Obadiah. At the end of the movie, when Pepper overloads the reactor, she does it by pressing a button that says palladium gas. In Iron Man 2, we learn that Iron Man is suffering from palladium poisoning, and the element ties back to his origin story in a lot of ways. The arc reactor returns at several points throughout the MCU, and in this film we see that Obadiah struggles to replicate Stark's design and make the reactor smaller. If you've been following our breakdowns, then you'll know that Tony improves his tech every film, and we can actually see in Civil War that he built an arc reactor small enough to fit into a wristwatch, showing how far he has come. The arc reactor scene of course features Peter Billingsley, who after getting a tie wafted in his face, ends up becoming a disgruntled Stark employee who is Team Mysterio in Far From Home. The arc reactor imagery also pops up in an amazing Easter egg in Endgame when the Avengers put their hands together. You can see the similarities in the looks here, and it's nice that this imagery reappears throughout the series. Though it saves Tony's life, after it's removed in Iron Man 3, we can still see the scars of where it sat on his chest in both Civil War and at the start of Endgame when Tony is arguing with Cap. The scenes in the cave with Tony and Yinsen of course mirror the ones in Endgame when Tony is adrift in space with Nebula. He also hammers the mask, and this clanging sound can be heard after the credits of Endgame, bringing everything full circle. There's also more imagery that would reappear in Endgame, and that is the positioning of his mask when placed down. When Tony gives his farewell message to his family, the helmet reappears in a similar setup, mirroring the first and last appearance of the helmet. When assembling the suit, Tony tells Yinsen every other bolt and no bells and whistles. This is why the suit falls apart when it crash lands on the outside, as it's not being completely assembled due to the pair having to work fast. Yinsen buys Tony some time and runs at the soldiers firing at the cave roof. He doesn't fire at the soldiers themselves because he's a doctor, and doctors take Hippocratic oaths to never harm anyone. In Doctor Strange, the character says that he too took an oath to save lives and not take them, and I like how all of the doctors in the franchise follow the same rules that we do in the real world. Another nice little touch is that Yinsen dies in a very similar manner to how Erskine dies in Captain America. The parallels in these shots are really well put together, and they show some of the staples of how their origin stories mirror one another. There's also an American flag symbol behind Yinsen's head, which may be a reference to Captain America. Iron Man escapes the cave, is rescued, and sent back to the good old US of A. The first thing he gets is a cheeseburger, which is of course what Morgan asks for in Endgame at the character's funeral, showing how similar they are. A subtle little joke comes when Obadiah asks Tony if he's got one for him, and Stark says there was only one, but he then pulls another one out at the conference. We also meet Phil Coulson, who would go on to star in pretty much all of these Phase 1 movies and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Who's hyped for Season 7? Anyway, Tony also says that he never got to say goodbye to his father, and this clearly hangs over him. In Civil War, he uses Barf to get therapy over it before he finally meets with the character in Endgame. Tony begins to build the suit, and there's a nice scene in which he puts his hand into a holographic version of the arm. Peter would later do something similar in Far From Home when creating his own suit. Stark goes upstairs to find Obadiah playing a piano piece by Salieri. Salieri was a composer who was overshadowed by Mozart during his career, and this jealousy allegedly led him to kill his rival. This theme of betrayal is of course shown in Stane's actions throughout the film. He finally double-crosses Tony at the end of the movie and tells him that the arc reactor is his 9th symphony. In classical music, it's thought that a composer will die after writing their 9th symphony, and thus Obadiah believes that the arc reactor will be the last thing that the character creates. The shots chosen for this scene also mirror Tony's battle with Thanos in Infinity War. Firstly, Obadiah pulls out the arc reactor, which sends the character into critical condition. This is similar to how Thanos stabs Tony in the film. Obadiah then leans over the character, taunting him over his death, and this is repeated with Thanos, who does the same thing to Stark. The final shots are set up in the same way, and they happen when Tony is at death's door. So we have everything coming full circle, with the first big bad that Tony fought in Iron Man mirroring the last big bad that he did in Infinity War and Endgame. It really is one of the best Easter eggs that I've seen in a film, and it shows the attention to detail that Marvel put into their movies. Tony takes his first flight, and his heads-up display warns him before he hits a pillar. It flashes red in a blink and you'll miss it moment, and it's just a nice little Easter egg that shows Marvel's attention to detail. When Tony flies past the Ferris wheel, we can also see that the speed of the suit is set to Mach, and it's below 1. Later, Tony of course passes this, and he's able to reach Mach 1 and break the sound barrier. When Tony's suit ices over and the power cuts out, we can actually also see his eyes through the helmet. This was something I never really noticed until getting a 4K copy of the film, and it's a great little detail. Tony returns home to find a gift from Pepper, which he pushes off into the lake at his funeral. When Tony is speaking, we can also see Jarvis copying his speech and transcribing it so that the AI can reply. The TV sounds up and the system does not register this, showing that Jarvis has been programmed to only recognize Tony's voice. The suit design is initially painted gold, which Tony says is a little ostentatious, and this is a callback to his golden suit design from the comics. The TV displays a news report that says Tony has been bedridden since his return, so to prove it wrong, he goes to the party that it's reporting from. Here he meets Coulson, who arranges an appointment for him, but he's so distracted by Pepper that he just agrees to it. This is why Coulson shows up later and saves Pepper, and Pepper is also wearing a dress that is blue, which he says is a birthday present from him. In Endgame, we learn that Tony has made Pepper the rescue suit as an anniversary gift, and it's the same colour as the dress that she wears in this scene. Christine shows him photos of his weapons being used by the Ten Rings, and he learns that the company is double dealing under the table. Tony decides to go after them and he works on his suit. We can actually see the energy moving from the arc reactor into his repulsor blaster, showing how they are powered. Tony flies out and destroys the weapons himself, and he comes face to face with the tank. He takes it out in one shot, and this is because the character helped to design the tank and therefore knows its weak points. He's then attacked by the Air Force, and though this isn't really an MCU Easter egg, one of the soldiers is the same guy that played Coleman Reese in The Dark Knight. Man, did that guy have a good 2008. Stark returns home and is dismantled. We can actually see a prototype of Captain America's shield behind him, which of course returns in Iron Man 2. Obadiah's allegiance with the Ten Rings is unearthed after Pepper goes through his files. Some of the names of the files are callbacks to Jeff Bridges' other movie, The Big Lebowski, such as The O Dude and MSC Lebowski. It turns out that Stane is building the Ironmonger armor, and the way that it moves and jumps is actually similar to the way that the Hulkbuster armor would later in the series, repeating the more bulky movements of the machine. Stark and Stane go head to head, And at one point, Tony takes off a glove after thinking he's defeated the villain. We can actually hear Stark's real voice and then the system's voice a split second after, showing the delay between the suit comms. At one point, Obadiah's targeting system is damaged and he has to eyeball the shot. In Civil War, this too happens to Tony and he has to manually aim his weapon. Pepper overloads the reactor and likely adds to Tony's palladium poisoning, but he lives to fight another day. A blue light shoots into the sky, and yeah, that's been done about 700 times in comic book movies since. They hold a press conference and Agent Coulson says that he has 90 seconds before the meeting. This actually takes 90 seconds before the conference itself, and Tony announces, "I am Iron Man," which would appear as the final line in Iron Man 3, ending the character's trilogy, and also it would end up being the last thing that he says before his death in Endgame. He goes home to find Nick Fury there, who tells him about the Avengers initiative, which of course sets up the entire MCU and the incredible 23 films in the Infinity Saga. And that's our list. Obviously, I'd love to hear what Easter eggs were your favourite and if we missed any. Comment below and let us know, and if you enjoyed this video then please drop a thumbs up and make sure you check out some of the insane details that we noticed in Thor Ragnarok. It's one of our best videos we've ever made, so definitely check it out after this. If you want to support the channel from as little as 99 cents a month then please click the join button below. We massively appreciate it, and as a thank you get access to content early. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at DefinitionYT or click the Discord link in the description below. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with heavy spoilers, so hopefully we see you over there very soon. This is a channel for people who are super into superheroes, so if that's the kind of thing you like, hit subscribe. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I've been Definition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.